Rahubat and welcome, Musba'ul Yasar. And to all of our YouTube family out there, we say also welcome, right? We thank you guys for taking the time out to watch another lecture of ours today. Today's topic is dealing with the African science of existence, part 3. And the title for this, the subtitle is The Power and Science of the Sex and Lust Force, aka Leviathan, aka Six Ether. Okay, so this is part 3. So for all those who's been waiting, now for those who are new to our channel and for those who do not know me, my name is Peti Sina Teptu Ra'e, and I've been a 30-year student teacher of the profound doctrine of the master teacher known to us as Dr. Malachi Z.K. York, also known to us as Panabab Yanana, who has dedicated the last 50 years of his life teaching us about our ancient culture, which known as Wu Nuwaupu or known as Wu Sabat. And this ancient culture is based on our ancestors who made decisions based on sound right reasonability. And the reason why we've been teaching this is because as African people worldwide, we got away from our ancient culture, making decisions based on sound right reasonability. And we argue the problems we're having in the world is due to this reality. And the only solution to the problems that we have in the world is for us to get back to making decisions based on sound right reasonability. But the only way you're going to be able to make decisions like that is you have to have the right knowledge. You have to have the right knowledge, and this is what we've been dedicated to. The master teacher has written close to 1,000 books, they say, for the sole purpose of giving our people the right knowledge, which leads to the right wisdom, that leads to one having the right understanding. And once you have the right understanding, then your decisions will be sound and they will reason out. And so the conditions that we see ourselves in around the globe will change due to this type of philosophy, due to this type of culture and principles of living. Okay, so that's very clear. Also, I'm the director of NoopooH and NoopooCC.com. Now, NoopooH, I tell everybody to support us, to go to our website. One of the things we also have posted on NoopooH is our petition is on the front page. When you go to the website, there's a tab, and click the tab that says petition and sign our petition, because this petition is about unity and love for black people to start network with each other globally. So
we're saying this is a social pact, a social commitment, a social contract amongst black people globally.
Yes, we ask you guys to sign that social contract of love and unity to support black people worldwide. So go to our website. The other thing is we ask everybody to become a member of NoopooCC.com. That's our own social engine. It's similar to Facebook, although we don't have the bells and whistles of Facebook yet until you guys support it and become members. Keep in mind, our social engine is fee-based. Unfortunately, unlike Facebook, Facebook is free because they make their money off of advertisement. We're not doing that. We want to be able to grow this social engine through us sponsoring and supporting. And just so you know, for those who don't know, it's non-profit. So it's not about us making money, but it is about us building this platform so that we can network with each other. Because we teach the greatest commodity one could have is a relationship, a positive relationship. There's nothing more valuable than that. And so that's why social engines has its values. Now, in regards to this lecture, this is part 3 of the African Science of Existence, part 3. So, if you have not watched part 1, if you have not watched part 2, then stop this video, this lecture, go to part 1, watch it, Then go to part 2, watch that.
And we will have the links in the description, so you all can click. It'll be easy.
And then you come and watch part 3. Why do we say that? Well, because each section that we deal with, it complements the other. So we are going to say things in this particular discussion that we explained in the other 2 lectures. So you're not going to comprehend. So don't waste your time trying to comprehend a lecture that we explained concepts in the previous 2. So I tell you, please stop this one, go watch part 1, then go watch part 2, then come back to this one. Now, if you've already seen this lecture, if you already saw part 1 and 2, then let's get started.
Also, just as a disclaimer, if you're new to our channel, you definitely should go back to our older and first videos, because all of the videos are relevant. They all have a compound effect where one subject matter builds on the next. And definitely like this video, give us a thumbs up.
That's right.
Share.
That's right.
If you care. Subscribe. Spread the word.
Oh, let me also add on. Listen, I'm one of many students of the master teacher. We're all over the world. Okay, we're all over the world who have been dedicating ourselves to teaching this right knowledge, so that our people can get back to making right decisions, as we keep saying. But I'm one of many. Also, I'm not above making mistakes. So if I do make any errors, I have no problem of correcting that. So I just want you guys to know that as a simple disclaimer. So let's get started. So this lecture is, like I said, the African Science of Existence, and this is part 3, and the subtitle of this particular discussion is The Power and Science of the Sex and Lust Force, aka Leviathan, aka 6 Ether. Now, as a prerequisite, I want to recommend some books. In fact, we have a lot of books that we're going to be recommending for this discussion. So, because this is a very intense subject matter. So excuse the lecture. I know it's long, but take your time. We also tell people out there, watch our lectures more than once, and I mean all of them. Watch specific these types of discussions. Watch it more than once. Take your time. Take notes if need be, and refer to the source material that we talk about. Okay, let's see. So here's how I want to get started. I'm going to get started by reading from a particular. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm supposed to tell you the books to recommend. The Liberating series. The master teacher has been writing about Leviathan since the 60s. Okay, and so you can see on the screen some of the books that we have on the Leviathan series. So that particular series, this subject matter, again, we've been talking about it for over 50 years. So this is an extremely important subject matter when it comes to Leviathan. All right. So I highly recommend those series of books. Another series of books in regards to this subject matter is the Right Knowledge Scrolls that the master teacher published, I think in 2001. It's 4 parts. So you have Right Knowledge, you have What is Nuwaupu, you have Our True Roots, and you have Breaking the Spell on the Blacks. Those 4 publications. So I highly recommend those 4 particular books in reference to this discussion, and you can find a lot of our books for free on Scribes. So just so you know that. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, I'm going to read from a couple books. The first book I'm going to read from is the first 4 paragraphs in a particular book called The Bible Interpretations and Explanations. This was published back in 1967, written by the master teacher. Okay, and then I'm going to carry over to another book, which is part 2 of the same series, and it was written the following year. I'm going to read the first 2 paragraphs of that particular book. All right, and it's highly relevant to this particular discussion. And keep in mind, this information was written back in 1967, over 50 years ago. And it was relevant then, and it's relevant now, and it's pertaining to this subject matter. So let me get started. Okay, it goes on to say, this is paragraph 1. There is a spell upon the Ethiopian woolly-haired people. And when we say Ethiopian, just so you know, we're talking about black people all over the world.
We
Okay?
referenced that in the last video. We explained all that means is children of ether, children of the sun.
That's right. There we go. So let me get started again. There is a spell upon the Ethiopian woolly-haired people the world over, and it is a spell of spiritual ignorance and racial indifference cast upon the Ethiopian by Leviathan from the Caucasian and his Bible. And this is why no one has been able to really unite Ethiopian in any considerable numbers, and is also why the people of African descent have not been able to make real progress towards freedom and equality. With the help of the Caucasian, Leviathan, which is the god of the Caucasian, hypnotized the Ethiopian with its magic powers and sealed the hypnosis with spiritual ignorance and racial indifference. And the only way the spell can be broken and the Ethiopian be free again and free indeed is that the spiritual ignorance be destroyed by spiritual knowledge and understanding, and the racial indifference be destroyed by racial knowledge and understanding. Paragraph 2. It is futile trying to free hypnotized people without using the magic formula that would reverse the hypnotic spell, which is keeping them in captivity. Part of the magic formula to reverse or destroy the evil hypnotic spell of Leviathan is this booklet. It is futile trying to unite so-called Negroes physically without first uniting them mentally. If we achieve mental unity, we are automatically united physically, because a person talks and acts the way that he or she thinks. Hence, the results of ignorant thoughts are ignorant words and ignorant works. If the minds of those of a kind are enslaved, the kind is enslaved no matter where they may be. But if the minds of those of a kind are free, the physical persons are free or will soon be free, because the mind is the control and thereby determines the course that the person or persons will take. Paragraph 3. When the mind is out of order, the person is out of order. When the minds of Ethiopians are divided, the physical persons are divided. Common knowledge, meaning knowledge that all or the mass majority of Ethiopians will understand and accept, will unite our minds. There can be no mental unity as long as the spell of spiritual ignorance is upon us. And there can be no physical unity as long as the spell of racial indifference is upon us. When destruction of the spell is complete, the Ethiopian will have a free and united mind. Right knowledge, by the help of the forces of nature, will destroy the evil spell of confusion, ignorance, apathy, and disunity among Ethiopians. Right knowledge is designed to free, discipline, and unite the minds of Ethiopians. Then the rest of our heritage will come as sufficient effort is made. Right knowledge, wisdom, and understanding are the magic formula necessary to counteract and destroy the evil hypnotic spell of Leviathan, because right knowledge causes the Ethiopian to think right and take the right steps towards liberty, justice, and equality by the help of the forces of nature. Paragraph 4. This booklet, which is booklet 1, provides some of the questions and answers necessary to break the evil spell. When the spell is broken, the spell and its evil results of disunity, hate for each other, disorder, apathy, and oppression will pass away from the Ethiopian and other oppressed peoples. All Ethiopians who accept the answers and explanations in this booklet and the facts of other booklets that may follow will soon be liberated from oppression and captivity and be equal. The Ethiopian lost his and her spiritual powers long ago, but this booklet would help us regain them by helping to destroy ignorance because without the restoration of our own spiritual powers, we can never be free and equal again. Our own spiritual powers are in Nuwaupu, the spiritual science of the Ethiopian, the woolly-haired people all over the planet Earth. Okay, so that's booklet part 1. And now I'm going to go to booklet part 2. It goes on to say, paragraph 1 of part 2. As stated in booklet 1, entitled Bible Interpretations and Explanations, there is an evil hypnotic spell cast upon the Ethiopian woolly-haired people by nature, everywhere by Leviathan, via the Caucasian and their Bible. And this adverse spell is also in the atmosphere itself because Leviathan emanates it. It is the ghost spell of spiritual ignorance and racial indifference. And the only way the opium-like hypnosis can be destroyed is by right knowledge, right wisdom, and right understanding, working with nature and its atmosphere of the new cycle, which is the revolutionary cycle, now coming in because right knowledge, wisdom, and understanding produce right thinking, and right thinking causes us to follow the right way to liberty and equality through right words and right works. Right knowledge is truth, and truth is the best knowledge. Therefore, if information is the best knowledge, it is the right knowledge. Paragraph 2, excuse me. Part of the evil spell is negative spirit forces within the oppressed, dispatched there by Leviathan. And this means, although those negative spirit forces are within the captive, they are enemies of the captive and thereby working against the captive by compelling the captives They are enemies of the captives and thereby working against the captive by compelling the oppressed to do the very things that are against the oppressed in the rise from their serfdom. It is a very depressive position for a race of people to be in, having forces within self constantly working against self and kind. But that is the position of the oppressed. And the only way to destroy the negative forces that maintain that position is to destroy the negativism, which is ignorance, that those negative forces live and strive on. The acceptance of right knowledge is the solution, for that leads to right thinking. And right thinking leads to right action. Okay? So now this was written over 50 years ago by the master teacher, explaining to us what the problems of black people all over the globe is. It's two main problems, he said. We suffer from racial blindness. Now, racial blindness was something that our good Dr. Chancellor Williams talked about in his book. As you can see, Destruction of a Black Civilization. This racial blindness issue has been going on for over 6,000 years. In his book, he talks about this was the conflict between ancient Nubia and ancient Egypt. They were fighting, same race of people, having a different position on how to deal with foreigners. Okay, and what he was saying was that the Nubians were not into dealing with foreigners, whereas the Egyptians were. I'm talking about mixing in. And so he was arguing most of our problems come from this racial blindness. And we all know that because of slavery. Slavery could not have happened if we were a united people. It only happened because of our division, because we forgot the science of racial unity. Right?
Divide and conquer. But you can only divide if you're already having that doorway open.
Yeah. And so the other problem is spiritual ignorance. Now that's a whole nother level. Our whole doctrine for the last 50 years has been dedicated to educating our people about what spirituality is. This is what's real. Honestly, our spiritual ignorance is what leads to our racial indifference, our racial blindness. Once you regain spiritual knowledge, then that racial blindness will go away as well. But
just as a recap, as far as the spiritual ignorance, we heard another phrase quite a bit, the spell. Spell Leviathan. We're up under a spell. And we're talking about like a real, like literal spell? Because some people might hear that and
like on Harry Potter.
Yeah, like
spell.
Harry Potter.
That's exactly what we're talking about. It's real talk. And I mean, think of it. They say that the existence of UFOs exists. They say there's the existence of ghosts exists, right? Mm-hmm. They say that there's the secret government that exists.
They say Sasquatch and all kind of beings that are not average everyday.
But here's the reality. Most of our people ignore those realities. They don't even bother to research the facts. Information that can have a profound impact on their lives. And I'm telling you, it is the spell that makes you ignore it. In fact, that's what religion did. What religion did was get us to make decisions based on beliefs and not facts. Literally. Religion got us believing in fairy tales. Like somebody is killed on a cross and then 3 days later resurrects. Okay, even if that was possible, then you would have some kind of evidence that that's possible. But there is no evidence that that can happen. But yet people believe it. And that's the problem. Only someone under a hypnotic spell would accept something like that. But that is what it is. So, let me do this. So now that was written by the master teacher, as I've read. He detailed what our problem was way back then. Okay? What our problem was and what the solution is, which is our ancient culture of Wu Nuwaupu, or what we say Wu Sabat today. Now, let me go on to say this. 30 years later into the future, he talked about and he wrote how he dealt with that particular the problem and the challenges he had as far as trying to solve and come up with a solution to the problem. And I think this is very key to listen to what he has to say on how he dealt with it for the past 30 years. So when you look at what he was doing in the 1960s, in the late 60s when he wrote those books, and then let's look at what he wrote in 2001, what he had to say on his 30-year journey in trying to solve this problem. I think is extremely important to keep this in mind. So I'm going to read this. This is what is known as the author's note that was put in the Right Knowledge Scrolls. So if anyone who have access to the Right Knowledge Scrolls, then you look at the first in the beginning of the book, and it has what is known as the author's note. You guys can see it on the screen there anyway. Now I'm going to read the first paragraph that's relevant, and it goes on to say this. This is the master teacher talking. He says, "I have devoted my visit to this planet to the resurrection of the mentally dead, which I affectionately refer to as mummies. Never did I know that the evil one had done such a great job with these people, both mentally and physically, as to have them hate self and kind. My greatest dilemma and hindrance has been the black devil, born amongst you and by you, married to you, socializing with you, praying in the same sacred houses of worship as you, but secretly they have a spiritual pact with the devil, which makes it near impossible for them to totally surrender to Nuwaupu. But for the few chosen from the many called, I sift to find those beings that wish to become one with the Supreme in all. So I, the Supreme Grand Hierophant, Amenubi Re'akta, as I am known throughout the mystical schools, the incarnation of Tahuti, thought, the student of the great tomb, known as Atum Re, the first point of resurrection from ignorance to the right knowledge, the right wisdom, and the right understanding. I have blended in with each of the religions most interesting to my people. I have lived as one of them, practiced as one of them, in order to reveal the misconceptions of these doctrines that have plagued and diseased the minds of my people. And so here you have him talking about, one, he says what his objective is, which is the resurrection of the mentally dead. Our people are totally mentally captive to the Caucasian in his world. And we're totally adverse to our own culture and our own nature. And that means we're mentally dead. right? Something Dr. Ben talked about, something Dr. Clark talked about, and definitely something the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was trying to explain, including Marcus Garvey was trying to explain that to our people.
We've heard it from even some of the psychologists, black psychologists.
Yeah.
Like Dr. Naeem Akbar.
Yeah.
Dr. Amos Wilson talked about it.
Real talk.
Yeah.
We're mentally, we're out of our minds. We still want to vote for Bernie Sanders. Our people voting for Trump. We're out of our minds. I mean, I don't know what else to say. But as the master teacher said, who's been his biggest dilemma? He called them the black devil. What he was really talking about, like he said 60 years ago, that spell of spiritual ignorance. That our people are basically spiritually possessed. It's a book that we wrote that I highly recommend that deals with the subject matter. It's called 30 Spirits. You guys see that? 30 Spirits. Okay? And it deals with that particular situation.
They can also recommend it. Watch our video we did. Spirit being possession and disunity amongst black people.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's extremely important to go back and visit that.
Absolutely. So, how did that happen to us? How did we get these negative spirits in us? Real simple. We violated the sex laws. We violated the sex laws. That's step one. And then step two, during slavery, the Caucasian made it their business to rape our people, to put their genetics in us. And by doing that, you now inherit the spirits of the other race. And this is a science that we overstood, and we had specific cultural practices when it came to sex. And that's why we titled this lecture, The Power and Science of the Sex and Lust Force. Okay? Because it's a science. And because the sex force that we're talking about is emanated through this spirit force that's known as Leviathan. Leviathan, you can find that in the Bible. Okay? In ancient Egypt, they called it Apophis or Aman. And in ancient Sumeria, they called it Kingu. Okay? And so, this is a spirit force, and it's very real. It's very real.
It's interesting to hear that we're dealing with the science of sex. Because one thing you hear rampant, throughout most cultures is the art of sex.
Yeah.
Saying that there's a science.
There's a science.
Pleasure and lust.
No, there's a science. Okay, so let me go on. Question. What happens when the universe drops down from 9 ether to 6 ether? That's the question. What happens when the universe drops down from 9 ether to 6 ether? Because these discussions, we've been talking about the smack circle. Okay? And the last lecture we had on the subject matter was dealing with 9 ether. But now we're dealing with 6 ether. And keep in mind, the number 9 and the number 6 are basically the same thing. The 6 is an inverted 9. The 6 is an inverted 9. It's the opposite of 9. So when we said 9 ether was the realm of Nuwaupu, and Nuwaupu represented life, 6 is the opposite of that. So 6 is what we call the realm of Zupu. And Zupu represents the realm of the dead, aka the realm of the sex force. Okay? So, let me say this. You go from the realm of the living, aka Nuwaupu, to the realm of the dead, aka Zupu. All must understand what dimensional shift is. Nothing is really solid but electromagnetic that changes when the morphic resonant frequency changes, which creates new matrices. Movement is what creates the electromagnetic field. Now, so when you move in on the smack circle, so when you look at the smack circle, you see 3 south, and then you go from 3 ether to 4 ether, 4 to 5, 5 to 6, 6 to 7, 7 to 8, 8 to 9. Okay? And then 9 drops down. 9 goes to 8, then to 7, then to 6. Okay? And when you see those changes, what that represents is a change in the electromagnetic magnetic field. Now, you have the changes in the electromagnetic field when it shifts from these different ether cycles. And each ether cycle shift is a dimensional shift. And it's a dimensional shift in the electromagnetic field. Now, why? Now, okay, let me try to explain this. When you're dealing with the electromagnetic field, here's what you guys got to comprehend. What you think is solid is not solid. What you calling solidity, like these books in front of here, right? You touch it, it's solid, right? This desk, I touch it, it's solid. You touch your hand, you say it's solid, right? Any object that you confront, we say this object is solid. Well, that's really not true. It's an illusion. What you're really touching is the magnetic field of the object, because nothing is really solid. Everything is just a field or a magnetic field. And the texture, why this book feels one way, this table feels another way, my phone feels another way. You have different textures, and that's based on the vibration of the elements that object is made of. So you're feeling the vibrational magnetic field of the different objects, but it's not solid. That's the key. So when the dimensional shifts are occurring, right? And when you go from 3 ether to 4, 4 to 5, and all the way up to 9, and then all the way down again, that's a shift in the magnetic field, and objects, they change. The morphic resonancy of the field is constantly changing with each dimensional shift. Now, we wrote a book on this. As you guys can see, it's called Dimensional Shift. I highly recommend that book. Okay, it's important to study that particular book because it goes into the subject matter that I'm dealing with. Okay, the dimensional shift. Also, in regards to helping you guys comprehend this topic a little bit more, watch this video. It's a video that deals with just this electromagnetic force and the fact that nothing is really solid. It's just the different magnetic fields. So check this out.
Photons are the packets of energy our eyes detect to see the world around us. And in the bizarre world of quantum mechanics, photons are at the very heart of magnetism. Plunging down to the subatomic level, we can see how atoms are made up of a nucleus surrounded by a cloud of electrons.
Think about the structure of an atom. There's a positive charge to the nucleus, and then the electrons have a negative charge. These two attract each other.
To explain this attraction, quantum physicists think that both protons and electrons spit out short-lived bursts of photons. Oppositely charged particles absorb each other's light, and this draws the particles together. This attractive force is known as electromagnetism.
Atoms themselves would not hold together if it weren't for electromagnetic forces.
Electromagnetism also causes atoms to stick together, to create the molecules that form us and everything around us.
Electromagnetism is responsible for the very structure of our matter, atoms holding together.
Molecular bonds in our bodies, those are bound together by electromagnetic interactions, and therefore they're bound together by light.
A universe without electromagnetism would come apart at the seams.
If electromagnetism was turned off, matter would dissolve.
Everything would just fall apart.
I could probably, with my superhuman strength, hold myself together, but the rest of you are doomed.
Electromagnetism not only holds everything together, it makes things feel solid.
When you touch something, that's the electromagnetic force as well. We have electrons in our atoms and they repel each other, and when you try to touch something, those forces keep you from actually physically touching it.
The reason I don't fall through the floor is not that the floor is particularly solid. Most of the floor is empty space. It's the electric forces of the atoms in the floor against the electric forces of the atoms in my body that hold me up. Just those little forces of those few atoms are enough to hold me up against the entire gravitational force of the Earth. Electromagnetism rules.
Okay, so now you guys should have some idea of what I mean by nothing solid, as the scientist on that particular video was explaining. Everything is just these different magnetic fields. It's highly important to comprehend that. I also have some other things to refer. Now, understand this. Let me just say this. Nuwaupu is the realm ruled by Leviathan, which is the beginning of the evolutionary cycle that started 18 million years ago. So this dimensional shift, that when it went from the realm of Nuwaupu that we talked about in the last video, and when it went to the realm of Nuwaupu, which is 6 ether, 6 west, that happened 18 million years ago on the planet. Just to give you an idea of how long ago that took place. Now we could go on to say, in the realm of Nuwaupu, our bodies we incarnate into never decay or die. And in the realm of Nuwaupu, our bodies have an expiration date which created the need for us to reproduce, okay? For the purpose of basically cloning new bodies for the new time cycle. So what does that mean?
We're saying that the bodies we used to have never decay.
In the realm of Nuwaupu, the atomic materials that our bodies were created of in the realm of Nuwaupu had no decay rate, because that realm, the life energies in the atmosphere was vibrant and full of life, and so there was no decay rate. And so in that realm there was no sex. There was no sex. In fact, sex didn't come on the scene in the universe until 18 million years ago, when the cycle of 6 ether, aka Leviathan, the sex force, came on the scene. And this goes on throughout the universe, cycle by cycle. These cycles are perpetual. So we said this in the last lecture, where a scientist will say, well, the universe existed for about 13 billion years. But like I said before, they don't tell you that the universe is going through these different cycles.
No, they make you think time is linear, and that's an extreme abstract number they just throw.
No, that's silliness. Everything is in a circle. Everything is in a circle. So when you look at the galaxies, when you see spirals, these circles turning, those are cycles. Okay? The solar bodies, all the planetary bodies are circles. Even the flat earth people who talk about the earth is flat, it's still a circle.
Yeah. I even thought it was weird when you look at a clock. They try to show that as a circle to show time cycles through every day, but
everything
then they'll say timeline, like that don't make sense.
Everything is in cycles, guys. So you have protons, electrons, neutrons, which are circles, and they make cycle orbits. Even the subatomic particles go in cycles. And just like on the planet Earth, you have cycles, right? Summer, fall, winter, and spring. The universe is no different. Don't let those mundane scientists tell you any difference. This is what our African ancestors made it quite clear, that we existed through these different cycles. So let me go on. Let me refer some books on this subject matter also. Let's see, if you go to Actual Facts number 36, Existence, How and Why, go to page 53. On page 53 it talks about the Tahites do not die or have sex in the realm of Nuwaupu. It also go to page 22, the same book. It talks about they incarnated from the sun. Also refer to actual facts called Pagotut. Go to page 15. Talks about how heaven and hell are the same location at different times. So you guys can see that. Also go to actual facts. Let's see, number 46, intelligent design, divine design, or plot of aliens. From page 84 to 89, it talks about, that explains that we planted our seed in the waters of earth and then incarnated onto this planet from Sahu and Sabat. That we did not, and it talks about that we did not die in the realm of Nupu until the realm of Zupu cycle came in. So when you read those particular paragraphs, it goes into explaining that. So let's move on. Okay, so 6 ether, aka the amber light, is the secondary creation force, aka death, aka lust force of natural nature, and the beginning of sex and the animal kingdom. Okay, let me read that one more time. 6 ether, aka the amber light, is the secondary creation force, aka the death and lust force of natural nature, and the beginning of sex in the animal kingdom. Our African ancestors taught in ancient Kemet, aka Egypt, what we call Magmat, that we came from the Khamunu, who were amphibian, living on land and in the waters of earth, as the female symbols represent the snake and the male symbols represent the frogs. So anyone who studies the ancient Egyptian mysteries and our creation stories, we say our first ancestors were called the Khamunu. And like I said, the females represented the energy of the snake because of the movement. The females have that seductress movement like a snake, and and graceful, right? And the male represented the frog, muscular, masculine, like the toad. You know, a man from the martial art movies, the toad.
Yeah, he has a firm stance, strong. Yeah.
And so those were our ancestors in the Egyptian mysteries, the first ones that we came from. And they were amphibians. Snakes are amphibian. Frogs are amphibian. Okay?
They live in land and in water.
They live on land and they live in water. And so that's how we existed in the realm of Nupu. When the realm of Zupu came in, then there was a shift. We went from the Khamunu, as our ancestors taught, and they talked about from the Khamunu, it went from the Khamunu to the Sebdeptu. And the Sebdeptu were our ancestors who existed in the realm of Zupu. And this is where sex came on the scene. Because when you read our stories about the Sebdeptu, who did we have? We had Shu and Tefnut. And from Shu and Tefnut, they had sexual relations, and they gave birth to our ancestors Geb and Nut, right? And from Geb and Nut, they had relations, and they gave birth to twins, right?
Two sets. Yeah.
Two sets. So you had Asar and a Set, and you had Nebtet and Satuk, right? And so those were the Sebdeptu. And so the Sebdeptu came from the Khamunu. Okay? So that's very important. Now, when it comes to the other races on the planet, I want to make this clear. You have the Asiatic races, which is you have the Hindu people, aka the Indian people, and you have the Orientals, like your Mongolians, aka Chinese people. Their origins is different than our origins. Their origins is in alignment with what the Caucasian has been talking about, these tailless monkey people. Okay? AKA, they call them the hominin, which is these monkey-like people. So when you hear about the origins that the Caucasian keeps saying that, the common ancestors of humans
some kind of ape.
You have a common ancestor of an ape, whatever. They're talking about the monkey people, and that's in the Hindu, aka Indian culture, about having a monkey origin, and that's also in the Asian culture, having this monkey origin. in their bloodline.
We see that in, they talk about it in their deities. They show a lot of movies. The Monkey King, the Monkey God.
The Monkey God, they call him Hanuman. Hanuman. Show a picture of him. Hanuman. He was in the Black Panther. That's what the brothers from the Jabari tribe, they worship Hanuman.
M'Baku and them, yeah.
Yeah, M'Baku.
The great gorilla.
Hanuman. So that's a part of their culture. So there is a monkey origin. We're just saying that's not African. We taught our origin as amphibian, aquatic.
And some as a little recap. I know this is part 3, talking about another force of creation. Something you just brought up before. That when Leviathan came in, or when 6 West hit on the smack circle, it was actually a secondary creation. So we're saying everybody didn't come from the same creation. You got different types of creations.
So you had primary creation, which is 9 ether, and that's our ancestors. And then you had secondary creation, and that is the creation of the straight hair people. So you have the woolly hair people, which is the African race. And then you have the straight hair people, which is all the Asiatics, including the Caucasian, because what is the origin of the Caucasian? They're nothing but the albino children of the Hindus, right? So we show a picture of them. They're nothing but the albino children of the Hindus. You see it, right?
Hopefully that clears up a lot. Because we had that discussion quite a bit. What is their origin? Most everybody says, no, they came directly from us. And they'll say stuff like, well, look at the albinos.
They're albino children of the Hindus.
Because there's a difference between an albino African and an albino Hindu.
There's a big difference. Albino Africans are still Africans. They're not Caucasian.
Gotcha.
Okay? And so, but the Caucasian is the albino children of the Hindu, and they came on the scene only but about 6,000 years ago. Prior to 6,000 years ago, there were no Caucasians on this planet. And we will get into that in our last lecture, which is the Many-Faced God lecture, which is part 4. Okay? So keep that in mind. And let me just say that some books I want to refer on this subject matter. Now, the master teacher has been teaching us about our amphibian origins way back when we were Ansars. Anyone can refer to the rebuttal book we put out. If you go to the rebuttal book, and you see right here, and this book was published in 1989, and you go to page 220, it talks about it, and on page 223 it talks about it. Also refer to the black book we put out, and that we put that out in the 90s, and it talks about our amphibian origins, and it talks about these monkey gods and goddesses. In fact, the word monkey, that's where the concept of monk comes from, right? So you have the Shaolin monks.
Yeah.
The monks, that origin is coming out of the monkey, and their spirit force, which is 6 ether, which represents the amber light, and that's why they wear those amber and orange robes. So you see the Hindus with those orange and amber robes, and you see the Buddhist monks with those orange and amber robes. That's their energy. Our energy is the black light when we're in Nuwaupu, and the green light when we're in the realm of Zupu. Okay? Their energy is the amber light, and that's 6 ether. It's a weaker creation force. That's why the African genetics is more progressive than anyone else's genetics on Earth. It's just an actual fact. And for those who need, just watch the other lectures. We talked about Layla Africa. He goes into that.
Talks about the different type of melanin and
exactly.
How personify. Yeah.
And as far as the Caucasian origin, like I said, they're the albino children of the Hindus who migrated into the Caucasus Mountains because they lived in caves. They migrated into caves. Now, if you guys want to do some research on that, I recommend looking up, it's called the Kurgan culture. Kurgan culture. That is the culture that they'll basically let you know that they lived in caves and they came out of those caves 6,000 years ago. Look it up, you can see it. So let's move on. Next, what happens when black people have children with other races? What happens when black people have children with other races? Now remember, we're talking about the power and science of the sex and lust force, okay? And this came with Leviathan, which started 18 million years ago, where in Nuwaupu, in the realm of Nuwaupu, there was no There was no sex. Everything was asexual. When it came into the realm of Nuwaupu, this is when sex became on the scene. Okay? So let's go on. Now, what happens when black people have children with other races? We must understand what is... Okay, here's the thing. You got to understand these concepts. We talked about this in part 1. What is ether? What is morphic resonance? And what is a matrix? You got to comprehend those 3 concepts. What is ether? What is morphic resonance? And what is a matrix? Because everything in existence is made up of ether. Okay? And depending on the cycle and season, when that, whatever that is, was developed, it has a certain morphic resonance. And whatever that morphic resonance is of that particular species, that is its matrix, which you call genetics. Every species has a morphic resonance dedicated to that particular species. So when you look at a whale, okay, it has a certain morphic resonance, which is a frequency, and its morphic resonance develops its matrix, and that's its genetics.
Okay, so just a recap of this, and to make sure we're all clear. Morphic resonance is a tone of a created species of being. Yes. That tone has a black print or a structure, yes, which is its genetics. Yes. And that's how it will come into existence.
That's how creation actually creates.
I want to tell you about the universe. What it is, how it came to be, what its building blocks are. I want to tell you how the future creates the past, which then creates the future.
But first, I want to tell you about crystals. You might be surprised to know that a crystal isn't an expensive piece of glass or a chandelier in some fancy dining room. The word crystal simply means a pattern that is periodic.
Look at this checkerboard pattern. See how it continues to spread out infinitely in each direction? That means it's a periodic pattern. So that's a two-dimensional crystal. This is another two-dimensional crystal. And this is another. You can also have three-dimensional crystals.
By the way, this 3D glass is called crystal because its atoms are actually arranged in a crystalline pattern. So, see how I'm projecting this three-dimensional crystal to a two-dimensional image on the sand? See how the 2D projection looks distorted because of the angle of the projection? That 2D image also has a pattern, but it isn't periodic. So, it's not a crystal. But there's a deep connection between the 2D object on the sand and the 3D mother crystal. This distorted 2D pattern is called a quasi-crystal. A quasi-crystal in a certain dimension, in this case 2D, is a projection of a crystal in a higher dimension, in this case 3D. A group of physicists in Los Angeles is working on a new physics theory where a particular 8D crystal, yep, that's right, an 8-dimensional crystal, is projected to 4D at a very particular angle, which forms a 4D quasi-crystal. And from this 4D quasi-crystal, they derive a 3D quasi-crystal, which they believe is the fundamental substructure of all of reality.
This 3D quasi-crystal has a fundamental building block,
a tetrahedron, which is a three-dimensional equilateral triangle. The size of each edge on this shape is the smallest possible length that can exist. This is called the Planck length. It's 10 to the 35 times smaller than a meter.
So you know how your TV screen is broken down into building blocks called pixels? A pixel is the smallest possible indivisible unit of the 2D screen. So think of reality as your TV screen, but in 3D. And think of the tetrahedron as a 3D pixel, the smallest possible indivisible unit of reality.
The tetrahedra in the quasi-crystal combine with other tetrahedra, using complex mathematical rules, to fill up all of the space in the universe. Each tetrahedron only has a few specific states in which it can exist at any given moment. And because of the rules of how these pixels connect to each other, if one tetrahedron is in a certain state, this dictates the states of many other tetrahedra throughout all of space. But here's the weird thing. If a certain tetrahedron can be in any one of just a few possible states in a given moment, who or what chooses the state it should be in at any given moment?
Well, for such a choice to be made, we need to scientifically, mathematically, and logically bring in a new element into physics. And that element is consciousness.
That's how creation actually creates. It emits a morphic field, and from that morphic resonancy, that's how life is germinated. Different species are created by these morphic fields.
The different tones and vibrations.
Different tones and vibrations. I recommend looking into the science of cymatics. Cymatics, yeah. Cymatics, where frequencies produce geometric shapes.
Yeah, so that's the science of visualized sound. You can produce a sound and it alters the matter.
It creates a structure. It creates a harmonic structure.
Third experiment in the cymatics music video we call hose pipe, and this one is pretty much a camera trick. We attach a hose to the speaker, and the speaker's vibrating 25 times a second, and the camera is taking 25 photographs a second. The end result is that the water looks frozen in a spiral formation.
And it's kind of like that bullet time effect in the Matrix. You know, you can wrap your camera around it and it appears that the water is frozen in time. And what it's really doing is showing you exactly how the water is vibrating in space because of the sound frequencies.
The hose is in the left, camera takes a photo, wiggles back and forth, gets back to the point it started in, camera takes another photo. And what that means for the water is it's only taking a photograph when the water's in a certain position, and it just happens to end up looking like a spiral.
So the only place we could test the hose pipe was inside Nigel's shower, which meant that we had running water connected to a speaker which was plugged into mains power. Probably not the smartest thing to do, but luckily we didn't get into many major accidents. So if you're using a tone that is close to but not quite the camera's frame rate, the spiral appears to move backwards and forward.
And that's what's happening in the video when the spiral appears to suck up into the hose.
It creates a harmonic structure. And that is the origin of morphic resonancy. Okay? Every species has its own natural nature morphic resonance, including human beings. So the African race has a morphic resonance. The Asiatic races, the Chinese has a morphic resonance. The Indians have a morphic resonance, including the Caucasian has a morphic resonance. So what happens when two different morphic resonances mix in? It creates an alteration. It alters its matrix, which means it alters its genetics. Now, nature is what produced your morphic resonance. In order for you to be in harmony with nature, you have to maintain it. This is why you don't see the animal kingdoms mixing in. You don't see a lion trying to mate with a giraffe. You don't see a whale trying to mate with a hippopotamus. You don't see that because it would throw off its matrix, and if you alter something's matrix, which is its genetics, you alter its morphic resonance. And when you alter its morphic resonance, you alter its behavior.
Gotcha. So, a recap for that, when we say mixed, when people are mixed, people get together, it alters your genetics. And we say nature is what created those morphic resonances.
That's right.
Nature would then be what created the genetics.
Yes.
So we hear a whole lot of people say something like race is fake, race is a construction.
No.
You know, it's like we're saying nature created the races, not humans.
No, nature is what created us.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. It is not Poof the Magic Dragon and woof.
Yeah. Well, you know, they have those sayings, you know, especially in this culture, miseducation, that like, you know, race doesn't exist. We're all the same on the inside, you know.
Yeah, that's a nice philosophy. It's just not facts. If you look different on the outside, that means you're different on the inside. Stop listening to these disagreeables telling about we all bleed the same blood. That's a lie. Our blood is vastly different. That's why we're having such health problems as black people living in Caucasian culture, because they have a different morphic field. And they have different medical needs than black African people. I said it before. Black African people have to be outdoors 90% of the time, not indoors the way we're living in European cultures. We're constantly indoors.
So we can't even really process the same foods they can.
No, we're not supposed to have the same diet, eating the same things we have, breathing the same things we have. We do not belong in cold climates. We don't belong in it. It alters our morphic fields and it weakens us. Literally, we're in a weakened state because we're living a foreign culture. If we forgot this science, like I said before, and I started this lecture out, we're under a hypnotic spell and we forgot our origins and we forgot our purpose. Okay? You can regain it once you get the right knowledge. Once you have the right knowledge, then you can start correcting your decisions. You can correct your behavior and stop worshiping foreigners and their ways. Stop thinking that their ways don't have an impact. Just me speaking English alters my morphic resonance. We have a certain language we're supposed to speak for us that's in alignment with our morphic fields. It weakens us. It's what's aging us. It's what's making us die quicker. Our ancestors, they lived for hundreds to thousands of years. We live to 50, 60, 70 if we're lucky.
We call that old age here.
We're dying at a very young age because we altered and corrupted our genetics, which altered our morphic fields, and it took us out of harmony and tune with nature. This was your ancient science, a Wu Sabat that we forgot. You guys, you gotta listen. You gotta listen. But let me go on. Let me refer you to some of the literature. I refer to Science of Healing book we put out. Highly recommend reading that book. This book, go to page 81. It explains how our bodies are based on electromagnetic fields of the earth. The human body is based on the electromagnetic field of the earth. This is why you see when they look up what they look up. When they do genetics, right? And they say that the difference between a black person and a white person
like
is 99.9, you know, we're 99.9% the same, right? That's because we have the morphic field. All species on Earth share the same morphic field, okay? Of the magnetic field of the Earth. But but it also has its unique morphic field when you see the differences between the species. So that's why you see, what's the genetic difference between a human being and a chimpanzee?
I think it's like 90-something%.
98.
Yeah, 98%.
It's a 2% difference. But now look at the difference between us and a chimpanzee. Ask a chimpanzee to write a letter. Ask a chimpanzee to build a rocket ship to go to the moon. Can't do it, can it? So that 2% matters a lot.
Well, I guess the 1% means a whole lot of difference.
Listen, people, watch this. 40% of a banana, we have the same genetics, 40% of a banana.
Yeah, what is that supposed to
40%
mean?
of a banana, we have the same genetics. What the hell does a banana got in common with us?
What % banana are you? Did you know that animals and plants share a common ancestor from 1.6 billion years ago? That means various genes may be shared across multiple species. Humans share 99.9% of their genome sequence with each other. Most scientific studies say we share 98.5% of our DNA with chimpanzees, our closest genetic relative. But what about a banana? Humans share approximately 60% of their DNA with banana plants. We also share about 90% of the same genes as cats, 85% of the same DNA as dogs, 88% of the same DNA as mice, 85% of the same DNA as cows, 73% of the same DNA as zebrafish, 69% of the same DNA as platypi, 65% of the same DNA as chickens, 47% of the same DNA as fruit flies, 44% of the same DNA as honeybees, 38% of the same DNA as roundworms, 25% of the same DNA as rice, 24% of the same DNA as wine grapes, and 18% of the same DNA as baker's yeast. While everyone is different in their own way, always remember that we share at least some of the same DNA.
Yeah, what is that supposed to mean?
40% of a banana, we have the same genetics. What the hell does a banana got in common with us? That's the magnetic field of the Earth. The Earth has its own morphic field. So every species on Earth will share the same genetics far as when it comes to that, a similarity. But we also have the differences. And that difference is what makes the different species. And that's what matters. Okay?
Because even when we say 1% or 99%, we talking out of trillions of cells and trillions of bits of information, DNA.
Yes. When you alter your morphic resonance, it takes you out of tune with nature. That's the key. Also, I refer to the Black Book 2, guys. The Black Book 2. Pages, let's see, paragraph 170, 182. That's a very important book to read because that explains that two individuals were properly chosen by the priest to have sex, which was a sacred ritual that was practiced based on certain times of the year that was aligned with certain star constellations so that the right spirit would incarnate into the right body at the right time, which is kind of how we say Dr. York was born. But
so you're saying we had mating seasons?
We had a science of sex. Sex was a ritual. It's not what you see going on the planet now, this free sex thing that all over. Sex was a ritual. It was a science. And you had to do it at a certain time of the year because of the fact that it was about bringing in children, right? A child is incarnated into the womb of the mother. So I'm not going to go too much into it. I recommend the book. I'm letting you know sex was a science with our ancestors. Okay, so that's that. So let's keep going. Also, let me just say this. I referred to the book called The Proof we put out, Actual Facts 108. If you read from page 33 to 36, it says our DNA is a time recorder passed down from generation to generation that does not lose memory, which is how we maintain eternal life in the realm of Nuwaupu. This is one of the things of what sex was to our ancestors, was you were cloning yourself. So the children had a direct copy of your memory. So we used to pass down our genetics and our memories that way. That's another reason why we never would mix with another race. Because it would alter your genetics, which alters your matrix, which alters your morphic resonance, and it literally cuts you off from your ancestors. Africans are always talking about their ancestors, that we had a connection to our ancestors. We don't communicate with them who live on other realms and other dimensions because we've altered our morphic field and it cut us off from them, guys.
So we have different tones now than them.
Yes. So you can't connect. You can't connect with your ancestors. We had a science on how we used to do that. You altered your morphic field, now you're cut off. So you have to correct it. It takes 4 generations to properly correct it. I'll tell you that right now. 4 generations of not mixing in, which is why the Caucasian is pushing mixing your genes more and more. But let's go on. Now, let's see. Couple things. Some more stuff I want to refer to. Refer to Birth of Earth and the Matrix. This is Master Secrets number 1. Let's see. This scroll explains the nature and importance of the natural nature matrix and how life and change come about. So look into that book. Also, let's see the book, The Master Secrets number 2, called The Black Dot. Go to paragraph 17. Talks about how the Panatharu, our ancestors, designed our DNA, our own matrix. It talks about that. And then go to Actual Facts number 46, Intelligent Design, Divine Design, or Plot of Aliens, and see page 24. Let's see, paragraphs 93, 94, and 99 explains how morphic resonance creates the matrix of existence. So all of those books definitely look into. Also, I have another book that you guys got to look at. This is Actual Facts number 20, The Lost Records of Time. This is page 42. It shows a matrix grid based on 9 ether, shows the center of the galaxy. So check that out, right? And then we have Master Secrets number 21, The Physical Ethers, page 1, paragraph 78. Because of slavery mixing with the Caucasian, it talks about how our matrix was altered. And then the last one is Actual Facts number 16, The Birth of Religion, page 15, talks about how we incarnated on earth as gods and became human by way of the cycles of nature. So all of that is highly important. So now, next thing I want to talk about is black people are suffering because we violate the sex laws of natural nature, aka Ma'at, based on our ignorance to the ever-changing rules of natural nature. So we're literally suffering because we used to understand our ancient sciences, and now we're ignorant to our ancient sciences, plain and simple. The whole Egyptian culture was based on living according to the principles of Ma'at. Our people don't know what the heck Ma'at is. Now, we did a lecture on that, so I highly recommend definitely studying that lecture that we did on that particular subject matter. But let me go on. Our ignorance of the laws of nature, such as we're ignorant to the law of preservation of self and kind. That's law number 1, guys. Preservation of yourself and your kind.
Most things we taught in this culture is just go for self.
Self-preservation, yeah. That's all capitalism is. That's not African. You exist because your mother and father exist. They exist because their mother and father exist. And if you have children, your children only exist because you exist. So we overstood. We couldn't exist without our kind. So we overstood in African culture. It was always about our kind. That's when we had racial knowledge back then. We lost our racial knowledge going back 6,000 years ago. I know it's a long time, but people, we've been on this planet for millions of years. Okay? We are an ancient people. Stop listening to the disagreeables lie about our origins. The same people that came out of the Caucasus Mountains, they don't know no one's origins. They don't have no place to be telling us who we are, where we come from, with all the so-called rocks, bones they dig up. Don't believe it. Don't believe them. But let's keep going. Okay, so We used to know the laws of preservation of self and kind. The other law, we used to know the law of the opposites. That's why you guys don't understand why you don't deal with other races and mix in. We used to understand the law of the opposites. And we used to understand that the different, how can I say, different species have different morphic fields. That is in opposition to your field. So you have complementary opposites and you have adversary opposites. What is complementary opposites? The black man, the black woman. That's a complementary opposite.
Complementary.
Yes. And then you have adversary opposites. The white man, the black woman. That is an adversary opposite because they have different morphic fields, which means they have a different matrix, which means they have a different genetic structure. That is a, how can I say? That is an
extreme opposite.
That is an adversary opposite. Mm-hmm. So you have complementary opposite and adversary opposites. We used to understand the law of the opposites. Everything in existence is based on opposites. If you have up, you have to have a down. If you have a right, you got to have a left. If you have a hot, you're going to have cold, right? You have sweet, then there's sour, right? There's what else you got? You got
you got them in the colors.
Sun, and then there's moon.
Okay.
Right? So all of existence is based on opposites. You have the electron, the opposite is the proton. Yeah. All of creation is based on these opposites. We used to know these laws. Okay? The next important law we forgot was the law of pain and pleasure. We knew that pain must be offset by pleasure and pleasure must be offset by pain. We live in European culture. That culture, capitalism, teaches you just to constantly gain pleasure, called consumerism. Eat till you drop. Play till you drop. Constantly consuming cars, houses, jewelry. It's pleasure, 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 and do everything in your power to avoid pain. You're violating natural law.
That's the lust portion.
Yes.
Endless lust.
Lust. It's the spirit force. We're compelled to do it because we're stuck into that spirit force. You have to override that spirit force through right thinking, right knowledge. The other important natural law we forgot and we don't live by is the law of divine peace and love. Divine peace and love. We used to know what that is. What is peace? Peace is being able to sit in a dark room of blackness. Blank your mind. Let your body feel the magnetic force, the energies of creation itself. Put yourself in that meditated state. That's the peaceful state. That's tranquility. Okay? That's peace. And divine love is that frequency. That's a frequency in that realm of peace. What we think is love is the love you have for your family, the love you have for your wife, the love people have for their cars, the love people have for their jobs, the love people have for their hobbies.
Sound like attachment.
Yeah, it's what we call, it's not real love. It's love. Let me do it like this. Love has no conditions. Like the sun. The sun shines on all and everything equally without conditions. What we call love is you marry someone, right? And you marry them because you love them. Then they do something you don't like, and then you talk about, I want a divorce because I hate them. What? Did you really love them then? Love doesn't have conditions. You would think, we talked about this before, with their weddings, right? Mm-hmm. Till death is the only way you part. You say those vows and y'all don't mean it.
Until you piss me off. And then we part. Yeah, until you do something I don't like.
Right. We forgot. We used to understand these concepts. We don't understand them any longer because we're living a foreign culture. Okay? Let's keep going. For all who are subject to the laws and rules of natural nature, which are binding and unchangeable until the new cycle comes in. So we overstood living according to these rules of natural nature, and these rules change according to the cycle and season. That's the important thing to understand. And let me just say this, I have some more books on to refer to on this subject matter. Let's see, so we have the actual facts number 21, and this is the image of the beast on page 22, paragraph 70. It says, we practice the law of preservation of self and kind. So this, this used to be our culture. Also, let's see, Master's Secret number 12, the ultimate reality, page 7, explains we must get our reasoning back by way of our rituals, which allows us to be in harmony with natural nature. One of the ways of helping us correct ourselves is we had a different code of conduct, rituals that we used to go by. In fact, this is where religion comes from, by the way. The Greeks and the Romans took our spiritual practices and sciences and turned it into religions. Okay? We had, like, the fast of Ramadan that the Muslims, that they practiced, that was done in ancient Kemet. We did those fasts. And we did those fasts because we understood how to purify the body. Not because some mystery God told you to fast.
I'm seeing where on the walls they show we did the same positions like how they make a salat. Yeah.
Yes, positions of salat. Those were rituals to calibrate our morphic fields. It was a science that the foreigners came into our lands. They did not comprehend our science, the Greeks and the freaking Romans, and they took it and created these religions. Okay, yeah, that is what it is. Let's keep going. What is love? What is lust and longing? Which all starts in the heart seat, aka emotions, that lead to thoughts, which leads to actions of the mind, which is influenced through spirit energy. Okay? Lust, or excuse me, love. We talked about that. This concept of love that we get in this culture, right? So what happens? The guy comes to the girl, he gives her the diamond ring, and she's like, oh, I love you.
You see that in a bunch of commercials, right?
I love you so much.
Yeah, eyes get bigger, like, oh my gosh. Yeah.
That's a spirit force, that's an energy. That's an energy that's emitted through us, right?
That's ether.
That's an ether energy. That's a being that's in us that makes you feel that way. Okay? Then you have this thing of, we know about lust. The whole porn industry is based on lust. Right?
Yeah.
The whole porn industry is based on lust. Plain and simple. Capitalism is lust.
Yeah.
Bottom line. You got 8 white men who own half the wealth in the world. If that ain't the epitome of lust, I don't know what is. Then you have longing, right? That's the concept of the guy and the girlfriend, they're separated. You're separated from your wife because you're working in LA, she's working in she's working in whatever, Texas, and you haven't been with each other. You long for that individual. These are all spirit force energies. Okay? And this spirit force influences our behavior, and it's coming from the heart center. It's coming from the heart center.
Over the past 18 years, our research center has investigated heart-brain interactions, how the heart and the brain communicate with each other, and how that affects consciousness and our perceptions. One of the things we identified in our research was the state we now call coherence. And what we found was that when we're feeling positive emotions, like we're really appreciating the sunset, or really feeling love or compassion or care for someone, that the heart beats out a very different message. The heart generates by far the largest rhythmic electromagnetic field produced in the body. And what we've now found is that if we look at the spectrum analysis of the magnetic field radiated by the heart, that emotional information is actually encoded and modulating into those fields. So by learning to shift our emotions, that's changing the information we're encoding into the magnetic fields radiated by the heart. and that can impact those around us. We are fundamentally and deeply interconnected with each other and the planet itself, and what we do individually really does count and matters.
So those feelings is what we're saying is being influenced by Leviathan. That's just, it's an actual force. It's a spirit force that's influencing us. We understood this science and when we was in our right mind. Okay, so I want you guys to watch this video, and this talks about, this video is going to show you population growth. Okay, so now you see this population growth and basically how the human population expanded. And what I'm talking about, this is a real spirit force, the sex force that we're being influenced by. And it started 18 million years ago, which we call Leviathan. It's a force that compels us towards lust. It's a force that compels us towards sex. Okay? And let me just say this. When we talked about, and you're looking at this map, let me just say this. When you look at this map, what you'll see here, you got, let's see, 1 AD. When we say Leviathan, we said it's 6 ether. 6 represents sex. And we said the Asiatic race represents the sex force. The Asiatic races represents the sex force. So when you look at this map of population growth, look at all the population growth in Asia, in particular China and India. And you see it also towards Europe. You don't see this type of energy in Africa. In Africa, we had the deity called Men, the Egyptian deity called Men, and he represented the fertilizer. That represented to us the science of how we dealt with sex. It wasn't based out of lust. When the Greeks conquered us, they took that concept of men, and the city of men, it was the place called Achamen, okay? And the place called Achamen, the Greeks turned it into Panopolis, excuse me. And this is where the Greek god Pan came from. And from Pan was the sex god. And they spread this sex energy throughout. And so when you look at this population growth now in the map, and you see this growth in, again, you see this population growth in Asia. You're looking at the growth through, where we at now?
Yeah, what's the timing on?
It says we're going into the 900s. So in the 900s, you see India, you still see China, you see some peaks in Africa, but it's nothing like what you're seeing in Asia, of course. Okay. In fact, as it goes through this map, you won't see that hit us until the 1500s, which is the beginning of slavery. So as this population, it's just germinating. And why is it germinating in Asia? It's not a coincidence that today India has 1.3 billion people. It's not a coincidence that China has 1.3 billion people, right? Between the both of them. It's because they represent that science. They represent that spirit force. And it's a real spirit force that the Greeks and the Europeans were promoting. And was called the spirit force of Pan. So now, as you're looking at the map, you're seeing where are we at now? The 1500s now. So the slave trade, you see the slave trade happening.
So we're taking on their culture and doing the sex reproduction.
From slave trade, okay. Now the influence is being pushed on a continent. Okay? And so as you're moving through the slave trade, because you also see them now, they're in the New World, right? Mm-hmm. So they're in South America. You see them in North America. So they're pushing this energy. Again, they're pushing the Greek god Pan, which is their sex god, which is based on their science. So, because everybody know in India, the Kama Sutra. So now you see the population is skyrocketing now because you're in the 1900s. So this sex force energy is all over the planet. You see this massive population burst everywhere now, everywhere, to where to where we at today. And so what I'm saying is that's an energy, that's a force.
Devadasi literally means God's female servant. Dev means God. Dasi means female servant.
Right. Servant of God.
Servant to God. Where according to the ancient Indian practice, young pre-pubertal girls are married off, given away in matrimony to the god or local religious deity of the temple.
Right.
So that is the system. These girls are not allowed to marry. They were not allowed to marry. As they were supposedly married to the temple, she serves the priests and inmates of the temple and the local landlords and other men of money and power.
And in your opinion, you think it's successfully stopped?
It is stopped now.
Yeah. Good.
I heard about the Devadasi system 2 years ago. It was described as an ancient Hindu tradition in which young girls are married to God in childhood and then at puberty sold for sex. The money they earn given to their families. The practice was made illegal more than 60 years ago, but in spite of official denials, there are still an estimated 30,000 Devadasi in the villages and towns of Karnataka, southern India.
ಸಣ್ಣ ಇರ್ಕೊಂಬತ್ತು ಕಟ್ಟ್ಯಾರ ನಾನು ತೊಟ್ಟಲ್ದಾಗಿದ್ನ ಹತ್ರ ಆಗ ಕಟ್ಟ್ಯಾರ ನಾನು ಆ ದೊಡ್ಡವ್ರಾಗ ನಾ ಹಿಂಗೆ ಮೇರ್ನಾರ ಮ್ಯಾಗ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಡಂದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಮವ್ವ ಕೊಡುದ್ರ ಅಂತಾರೆ ಹಿಂಗೆ ಬಂದು ಮೈನಾರ ಮ್ಯಾಗ ಆಟೋದಾಗ ಬರೋಣ ಭಾಳಷ್ಟು ಹಣ ಕೊಡೋಣ.
In the Devadasi belt of Karnataka today, the women are all from the lowest caste, Dalit. But there is evidence of another pre-colonial tradition that was an elite of high-status women.
Women from a very, very vastly different range of caste and regional identities were all lumped together under this kind of umbrella term, Devadasi. And that included Dalit women, the kinds of women that we see in this film, and also elite, at the other end of the spectrum, elite courtesans.
This is the last known recording of a temple Devadasi. From childhood, she would have been taught the daily rituals that honored and appeased the gods, received lessons in the arts of music and dance, and since puberty, she would have been taken as the lover of a priest, prince, or another high caste male. On high holidays and at public processions, she and the other Devadasi associated with this temple would be bedecked with jewels and go out to publicly celebrate their devotion to God.
To have a star dancer attached to your temple or a troupe come in and to advertise it, it was a huge attraction. And what was in it for the temple was a hell of a lot of money, because they knew that the more pilgrims came, the more people would give money to the temple. Each of those women had their bottu kattidal, the ceremony of tying the bottu, paid for by the state. So what did that mean? That meant that the state owned them and could call upon them whenever it needed them to come into the court to perform.
By the 17th and 18th century, the elite Devadasi were living in full view of their patron's official family on palace or temple grounds, in encampments that involved hundreds, sometimes even thousands of women and their children. Because they had no mortal husband, they were considered head of their own household, a position unimaginable for a woman at that time.
Some of them were able to amass a tremendous amount of wealth during their own lifetime. The wealth usually was consolidated and stored in the form of jewels, which had to do with the whole perpetuation of their status as courtesans, of their lifestyle.
A Devadasi uniquely had land rights in her own name and the power to distribute and bequeath her own wealth down the matriarchal line. Her marriage to God made her auspicious, and she had responsibility for prayers and blessings that kept away the evil eye from temple, family, and court.
I want to recap because you brought up some information, and I know let's say the audience was watching the video. You brought up, what was causing these forces, these different God or spirit beings. You brought up men, you brought up Pan. Can we revisit that? Like, okay, what are we saying about this?
Those are science. Meaning in our ancient culture, in African culture, the deity men in African science, we understood we had a matriarchal society, if I'm pronouncing that right, which was the descendancy of rulership was passed through the female bloodline. So our women were always considered sacred. Our women it was important for our women to only have one partner. Not what you see today, because our women are the ones who had the genetic record of the family bloodline. They were the connection to our ancestry. So they only had one sex partner. This was an African tradition, okay? And that science was taught through the school of men. These principles. When the Greeks took over, they went the city.
You brought up Ahmen.
That was the name of the city that in ancient Kemet, Ahmen, or this is kind of part where they get the name Kemet, Kemet from that particular town. This is the origin of the word chemistry. And to be honest with you, when the Greeks came, when they took over Egypt, they changed the name from Ahmen to Panopolis, and they introduced their deity Pan, who represented the sixth ether force of lust and sex.
I guess when you look at the statues, they're trying to replicate it in their own, way.
That's what they did. That's what they did. That's what they did. I want to recommend another book on this subject matter. Is Actual Facts, called Feeding the Forces, right? And if you go to page 9, paragraph 70, it talks about how we vibrate on different modes. The different races have different vibration frequencies that we vibrate. So it's important to look into that particular book. And then the Science of Healing book, again, page 82, explains the difference between the lower self and the higher self. Okay, so we understood the science of the lower self and the higher self. You have, guys, today we're living according to the lower self, the lust force, the sex force. The higher self dealt with the mind. So I definitely want to introduce you to that. So let's keep going. Now, here, genetics is key to African life and well-being. We taught this science since the 1970s as Ansars. We must prevent perverted sexual behavior of the West, promoted by mass media and supported by the Democratic Party, which we call the Luciferians, who represent the Blue House, and their adversaries that they're always fighting in the media, the Republicans, who we call the Satanists, and they represent the red house. So if you notice, the red states, which are the Republicans, and those are the Satanists. And then you got the blue states, which are the Luciferians, and those are the Democrats. Now the Luciferians represent lust. They're the ones who promote lust all the time. That's the Democratic Party. That's why New York is a Democratic state, that's a blue state, and California is another Democratic state, that's a blue state. And what's in California? Hollywood,
yeah,
right? Hollywood and all that sex perversion that they push through Hollywood. And what's in New York?
The city that never sleeps.
Money,
greed,
Wall Street.
They started the porn industry
heart
there and all that.
of capitalism. Yeah, they used to have 42nd Street back in the day. All they did was push porn, and everything else. New York is known for lust, right? The city that never sleeps.
The rotten apple, right?
And that's the Democrat, guys. That's the Democratic Party that you guys keep voting for. They're the ones who push all of that. They're the ones who push pornography. They're the ones who push abortion.
And now they push the free love, any way you want it, whatever you feel like,
Yes. And then you have the Republicans. They're no better. They're the Satanists. Those are the bloodlusters, the warmongers.
Gotcha.
They're the warmongers.
The gun toters. I want to go to war.
Yeah, the Satanists. And so, guys, listen. We always talked about the science of sex. Okay. We always talked about preserving our genetics. This is something the master teacher introduced us to from day one. And he's been trying his best to teach us about these concepts, but we don't get it. We don't get it. I don't know what else to say.
In Islam, is there a marriage ceremony, or are people just married if they are?
No, there's a very strict marriage ceremony in Islam, the nikah. The actual dowry has to be paid. There has to be contracts drawn up. There has to be family meetings and discussions for genetics. It gets very intense because in Islam, we don't marry just because a person is pretty. We marry by genetics as well. We make sure there's no disease in the father's blood. If my daughter is to marry, I want to make sure that there's no disease in the father's blood or his grandfather's blood, so we inherit it. And this may sound bad, but you keep your bloodline pure by knowing who your children marry. And that's very, very, very important for you women, is not to marry dumb men because they're cute. You better start thinking about what you marry, because what you marry will determine what the intellect of your children are. It is time for us to start breeding mentally. We have stopped breeding mentally. We started breeding physically. People say, he has curly hair or light eyes or light skin, so I'm going to have a baby by him because I have light-skinned, curly-haired kids. Those days are over. It is now time for you people to start breeding mentally, because the higher the mental capacity, the easier it is for extraterrestrials to communicate with you. People on a low mental capacity, it's very difficult to penetrate that block, that ignorance. But people who are more sensitive spiritually, because they were bred properly, it makes it easier when extraterrestrials are trying to communicate.
But here's the thing. Perverted sex produces perverted life. And perverted life has no care for life, which perpetuates death. African ancestors were very mindful of this reality that humans today are completely ignorant to it. Okay? Perverted sex reduces the intelligence of the race that practice this behavior, for it destroys racial pride, which is a violation of law number 1, which is why the so-called slave trade was allowed to even happen. So keep that in mind. Because we lost racial pride, we couldn't defend ourselves as a group when the Caucasian invaded us 500 years ago during slavery. And now, because we didn't have racial pride, look what happened to us in the last 500 years. They did anything and everything they wanted to us during slavery. Anything and everything. And the Caucasian made it their business to mix into our genetics and messed us up. Messed us up. You guys now want to vote for Joe Biden, who's running for president, and this guy talked about how messed up our children are, calling them freaking, what do you call them, predators and demons. And he admit the American culture is the cause of our children being messed up. He admit that.
But he don't care though.
But he don't care. Listen to him.
We must take back the streets. It doesn't matter whether or not the person that is accosting your son or daughter or my son or daughter, my wife, your husband, my mother, your parents. It doesn't matter whether or not they were deprived as a youth. It doesn't matter or not whether or not they had no background that enabled them to become socialized into the fabric of society. It doesn't matter whether or not they're the victims of society. The end result is they're about to knock my mother on the head with a lead pipe, shoot my sister, beat up my wife, take on my sons. So I don't want to ask what made them do this. They must be taken off the street. That's number one. There's a consensus on that. Unless we do something about that cadre of young people, tens of thousands of them, born out of wedlock, without parents, without supervision, without any structure, without any conscience developing, because they literally, I yield myself 3 more minutes, because they literally have not been socialized. They literally have not had an opportunity. We should focus on them now. If we don't, they will, or a portion of them will, become the predators 15 years from now. And Madam President, we have predators on our streets that society has, in fact, in part because of its neglect, created. Again, it does not mean because we created them that we somehow forgive them or do not take them out of society to protect my family and yours from them. They are beyond the pale, many of those people. Beyond the pale. And it's a sad commentary on society. We have no choice but to take them out of society. And the truth is, we don't very well know how to rehabilitate them at that point. That's the sad truth. I'm the guy that said, rehabilitation, when it occurs, we don't understand it and notice it. And even when we notice it and we know it occurs, we don't know why. So you cannot make rehabilitation a condition for release. That's why in our system, there's the federal system, you serve 85% of your time. It's a shame, but we don't know how to rehabilitate. But there is a consensus, and I will cease. A, we must make the streets safer. I don't care why someone is a malefactor in society. I don't care why someone is antisocial. I don't care why they become a sociopath. We have an obligation to cordon them off from the rest of society, try to help them, try to change their behavior. That's why we do in this bill. We have drug treatment and we have other treatments to try to deal with it. But they are in jail, away from my mother, your husband, our families. But we would be absolutely stupid as a society if we didn't recognize the condition that nurtured those folks still exist, and we must deal with that.
So you heard him. He want to lock us up regardless because we're predators, right? Hillary Clinton called us the same thing, predators. They messed up our genes. That's why we're acting crazy, and they know what they did to us. But you know, it is what it is. Couple things. There's a book I definitely want to refer to, The African Cosmology of the Bantu Congo, Principle of Life and Living. Go to page 39 to 42. It talks about marriage with no divorce or so-called love in the beginning. So when this is an African brother who wrote this book, and he's explaining our culture. There was no divorce in our culture. People didn't get together because of love. we understood relationships were based on a certain science. Okay, there was another book that was written about the Tahites, and it talked about the ties. The females choose one partner, one mate for life. In this culture, you piss off your girlfriend, she's moving to another guy. They promote it every day of the week. That's just the way it is.
As far as sex being promoted and promiscuity, we talked before about sex being used like as a weapon, and in the media, we've seen it in movies. Got anything to say about that? Or?
Well, let me just say this.
Okay.
Also, I referred the guys to again to the Actual Facts 108, which is the proof, right? If you go to page 33, paragraphs 130, 132. And let's see, it explains that the females who have more than 3 male sex partners take on the genetics which affects the female's personality, making them more masculine. So the minute the female takes on more than one sex partner, you literally take on a masculine energy. You literally take on a masculine energy. And in fact, they said, if you look this up, they talk about females who do that. The sperm in a male goes into the brain. Female. The sperm in a male goes in the brain. I mean, okay, whatever. Let me go on. Leviathan, aka Sixth Ether, aka Apophis. That's what they call them in ancient Kemet. Apophis, Apep, is a sex spirit force that we have been teaching about since the 1960s. Sex has been used as a weapon against African people worldwide. They've used this as a weapon. Now, because of our ignorance to the sex, to science of sex, it's been used against us as a weapon. We have what is known as the poison media promoting promoting race mixing, and is promoting what is known as today as the gay agenda, right? It talks about free sex among same-sex individuals, which is a sexual practice that totally ignores the science of sex, which is a behavior promoted every day through the heterosexual population. The problem with this behavior adds to the problem of sexual responsibility. The porn industry has also poisoned the mind of our children. They say our children are watching more porn than ever before. Okay, I mean, whatever. Now, the spirit force we call Leviathan has been used against black people as a weapon by the Caucasian race. Porn, sexual content in all TV programs, movies, advertisements, sporting events, black women and men have been historically raped and molested by the Caucasian race, which produced a behavior in blacks which caused us to mimic this behavior today. The media used sex to attack and defame black men as well. We all know about Bill Cosby, Martin Luther King Jr., Noble Drew Ali, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Yahweh Ben Yahweh, including R. Kelly, and everybody knows about the master teacher, Dr. York. They've all used sex to defame our brothers, literally, as a weapon against us, to get us to turn against them. And here's what's crazy about it. Anything and everything most likely pertaining to sex about what they accuse black men of, white men do 1,000 times over.
Sex trafficking is a kind of forced or coerced prostitution. It's misusing another person's helplessness for sexual pleasure and profit. Today, there are at least 100,000 US children per year used for the purpose of commercial sexual exploitation, and 300,000 children are at risk of it. Globally, there are about 2 million children exploited for the commercial sex trade. What drives this enormous business is demand. Individuals, mostly men, who are willing to seek the services of women and children who have been pushed into a life of sexual slavery. A major reason for this demand today is pornography. 86% of prostitutes say Johns, that is the men hiring the prostitute, show them pornography in order to illustrate specific acts they want them to perform. Pornography helps to reinforce and train beliefs that make sex slavery possible, beliefs that women and children can become sexual commodities. Learn more about this connection between porn and sex trafficking in the ebook Stop the Demand, available for free at covenanteyes.com.
My day job is as the chairman and the co-founder of Thorn. We build software to fight human trafficking and the sexual exploitation of children. And that's our core mission. My other day job is that of the father of two, a 2-month-old and a 2-year-old. And as part of that job that I take very seriously, I believe that it is my effort to defend their right to pursue happiness and to ensure a society and government that defends it as well. But the right to pursue happiness for so many is stripped away. It's raped. It's abused. It's taken by force, fraud, or coercion. It is sold for the momentary happiness of another. I've seen video content of a child that's the same age as mine being raped by an American man that was a sex tourist in Cambodia. And this child was so conditioned by her environment that she thought she was engaging in play. I've been on the other end of a phone call from my team asking for my help because we had received a call from the Department of Homeland Security telling us that a 7-year-old girl was being sexually abused and that content was being spread around the dark web. And she had been being abused and they'd watched her for 3 years and they could not find the perpetrator, asking us for help. We were the last line of defense. An actor and his foundation were the potential last line of defense. That's my day job, and I'm sticking to it. Can we build the tools that are better than their tools to fight what's happening? There are sites in the United States that do this other than Backpage, a lot of them, in fact. There are sites internationally that are doing this. There are other sites. It's happening all over the place. It's been happening for decades in print media. We're now just recognizing it for what it is, and I think that that's the most important part. And secondarily to that is let's build the tools, let's finance the tools, and let's deploy the tools to fight back.
Guys, look at that. What's that guy? Jeffrey Epstein that they killed? Mm-hmm. They killed this guy. Killed this guy. This guy was a sex trafficker for the elite, right? Donald Trump was his boy. Bill Clinton was his boy. One of the princes of
like Saudi Arabia or somewhere out in the...
No, the prince in England. In fact, this prince, he was showing. They said the queen kicked him out of Buckingham Palace because of the because of the scandal. This is huge. This is huge.
Yeah, saying he was about to spill the beans on everybody. That's why they
killed them in prison. Listen, man, listen, there's a long history of how they violated us sexually. That's no secret. They messed us up, and they got the nerve to accuse us of that behavior. We had no such behavior in Africa. No such behavior in Africa. That is their spirit force, not ours. But unfortunately, we're living in culture today. We're suffering, okay? Look at this video, guys. They're promoting children. They're trying to teach children these concepts of sex, to promote this type of mentality. Watch this.
This is definitely an attack. It will affect your child rearing. It will affect your education system.
This is instructions for the teacher in the classroom to ask her or his students, how do people express their sexual feelings? Oral sex, masturbation, anal sex, massage, holding hands, touching each other's genitals, saying, I like you.
It is pornography men, especially on the House floor, did not want to look at. We couldn't show this on the television news, but yet we want our 4th grade children to be looking at this book.
The World Health Organization standards for sexuality education in Europe actually suggest that children ages 0 to 4 should be given information about masturbation and given the right to explore their gender identities. For ages 4 to 6, children should be taught about same-sex relationships and respect for different norms regarding sexuality. Some of the objectives of the UNESCO Sexuality Education Guidelines include teaching children at age 9 about sexual stimulation and the definition and function of orgasm, and at age 15, that both men and women can receive sexual pleasure with a partner of the same or opposite sex. An online CSE program for African youth called The World Starts With Me tells children that sexuality includes oral sex and masturbation.
They have elementary students as young as 9 years old. Then they teach them how to wear a condom. And they have this plastic genitalia, and they even have young girls. They're teaching them how to put a condom on a male genitalia and boys how to put a condom on a women's genitalia without the knowledge and consent of the parents.
They're giving them handouts, negotiating sexual encounters with other students. For example, there are statements like this: can I take your shirt off? It makes me hot when you touch me here. Is it okay if I take my pants off?
This pamphlet called Healthy, Happy, and Hot tells young people that you have the right not to disclose your HIV status to a sexual partner if you're not comfortable. It also tells young people that are HIV positive that if they decide with their partner not to wear a condom, that's their decision.
On page 89 of a UNICEF-published Sexual and Reproductive Health Manual, UNICEF listed situations in which one can obtain sexual pleasure that included sexual responses directed towards inanimate objects, animals, minors, and non-consenting persons.
In the context of the Sustainable Development Goals that determines the agenda for the next 15 years, the voice is very, very biased. It's just International Planned Parenthood Federation and their affiliates.
It's All One, however, like most CSE programs, is really just cleverly disguised abortion rights, sexual pleasure education, masquerading as human rights, gender, and sexual and reproductive health education. It aggressively promotes abortion. With over 112 references to abortion, It's All One has an obsessive focus on sexual pleasure, mentioning sexual pleasure 62 times. Comprehensive sexuality education programs are disguised under many names. They may be called comprehensive sex or sexual education, education on human sexuality, reproductive health education, information on sexual and reproductive health, family life education, teen pregnancy prevention, rape prevention, anti-bullying programs, HIV/AIDS prevention, and sometimes even abstinence or abstinence plus education.
One of the handouts that concerns me the most is called The Genderbread Person. They teach that gender is a spectrum, that you can choose to be whatever you want.
Say no to CSE! Say no to CSE!
We've got to stop it. We've got to use everything at our disposal. We have to stand together. My family is mine.
My wife is mine. I am hers. Our children are ours.
Band together and find ways to stop it from entering your country.
If we don't do something about it, it is all of us that carry that guilt.
To learn more and to sign the petition to stop comprehensive sexuality education, go to stopcsc.org. Together, we can and will protect the world's children.
Now you'll see this. We teach, there's a science to sex. You don't teach children these things. It's insane what they're doing. It's insane. They use sex as a weapon. That movie, what's that movie? The Red Sparrow?
Yeah, Red
that
Sparrow.
homegirl was in?
It comes in threes. So we've seen the Red Sparrow, seen the movie Anna, they just did.
Yeah.
Next year, they're doing it with Marvel. They're about to do the...
what's her name? Black Widow. And you know, guys, you know that's a true freaking story. The Russians really had a sex operation like that.
Yeah, they said that was a whole branch of the Russian military.
Their weapon is a secret seduction technique. Their means, sex. Their traps caught hundreds of influential men, such as British Prime Minister John Profumo, French Ambassador Maurice Dijon, Fidel Castro Jr., even Adolf Hitler. They were all victims of the girls from a special NKVD department. A division involved in the most effective kind of intelligence, sex spying. For the first time, we're going to describe the seduction techniques that were used by the Soviet sex scout and reveal the classified names. Hitler's favorite actress was Olga Chekhov. Kat, a famous radio operator of the 17 Moments of Spring, was in fact a scout, Anna Kameva. All of them, as well as dozens of other women in the NKVD, were not known by their names, but by a unique number, and were all called the Swallows. The secret department was created in 1937 under Stalin's order. The Soviet beauties were brought to Moscow for casting. The selection was made by a committee consisting of the best physicians, gynecologists, and psychiatrists. The head of NKVD, Nikolai Eshov, directed the casting himself. Out of hundreds of applicants, he had to choose 20 to be the first students of the Soviet Secret School of Sex Intelligence. In 6 months, the best scouts of the USSR will leave this school resembling female robots, devoid of fear and complexes. It was like a production line with a single template, white-skinned, slim and sexy, with a code number instead of a name, and with the nickname The Swallow. Coming up next, the secret schools of sex intelligence in the USSR, the prostitute secrets and spies training, the methodology of the honey trap, the shocking instructions on how to seduce men, the sex weapon in the war of the world's intelligence services, how Marshal Tukhachevsky's fatal mistake initiated a Soviet sex espionage.
It's real.
We'll play something from that.
It's real. It's real. They use sex as a weapon. AIDS, you know AIDS, they created that. You know they're the ones who gave us the STDs, gonorrhea, syphilis. Everybody know about the Tuskegee experiment. Gave those brothers syphilis. That's a sexually transmitted disease. They gave it to them and just watched them. And who knows how many people they infected with that. I don't know. This is what we're dealing with, but let's keep going. Control of education and have our own community is the only solution to the problem of sexual perversion. I'll repeat it again. Control of education and have our own communities is the only solution to the problem of sexual perversion. I mean, that's this. Black people are kept in economic slavery to Western culture, which makes it near impossible to escape the pitfalls of Western culture. Wu Sabat, which is our culture, is the only solution, guys. This is what we've been doing. This is why we're promoting NoopooCC.com. We can overcome this by networking with each other, supporting black everything. That's how we overcome these pitfalls. This is why we're doing the work that we're doing. It's just that simple. I know the problem is overwhelming. All of this stuff that we're talking about, we gave you a lot of information here. Wu Sabat is here to raise the consciousness of the world for the new cycle that we're in. That's why we're teaching what we're teaching. Sex, aka Leviathan, is a ruling spirit force we all must overcome by way of sound right reasoning, aka Wu Sabat, Wu Nuwaupu. You have the power to give them back their poison culture. It's by making the right decisions. Listen, we're only suffering because we're choosing now to live this destructive culture. We can choose not to live it. We can choose not to live it. And we have all the tools and all the techniques that we need in our culture. That's why I've been recommending all these books, and I know it's a lot. I know it's a lot. I know it's a lot. I know this is a long lecture. Take your time. Listen to what we're saying. Write notes. Watch this video. Even though it's long, you got to watch it more than once. This is a very important subject matter. We must understand this science. And it's due, why? It's due to the cycle and season that we're in. This is the cycle of the sex force. This is the cycle of lust. And that's why we're influenced by these things. But we had a culture that taught us how to override it. The problem is, as you already know, we've been invaded. And this was put on us. And that's just the reality of it. But the only way we can fix it is by identifying what the problem is and coming up with viable solutions to the problems. And that's what we're dedicated to. And that's what we're asking all of you guys to support what we're doing. So, I thank you. I appreciate for you guys taking the time out to listen to us again. I know, like I said before, this was a long lecture, but this is number 3. This is an important subject matter, right? Please thumbs up, because the more people you guys put thumbs up, this helps us. This spreads the word. It lets people know about the video, especially when you subscribe. You recommend it to others. You tell people to subscribe. We don't have enough people on our subscription, and we need your support. We can't grow without it. So support us, and all I can say is blessed.
Peace and love, y'all. Spread the word.